firecracker. You just wait. You just wait for today. We got it! Can you hear me?
Oh my.
Good morning. How about now?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
There we go. We got this shit. Look at that.
Oh my God. I know. This is crazy.
Oh my gosh. How's your energy this morning?
Oh, I'm always fired up in the morning.
I love it. When do you usually wake up?
Well, the older I get, the later it's getting.
Really?
So normally I get up around 5:30, 5:30.
Okay, right on. Do you have your coffee on hand?
Right here it is.
What are you drinking?
Black Rifle Coffee.
Black Rifle Coffee.
They're veteran owned, and so I like to support the veterans. I have it sent to me.
Yes.
Get it sent to me once a month. So it's good stuff.
Amazing. Hey, dude, well, thank you so much for joining us today. This is really, really exciting. You know that, I mean, every time I see you, I tell you how much I love you, and I also have like an insane amount of respect for you because, man, I feel like there's a lot of things going on in the fitness industry nowadays, and it's like people try to reinvent the wheel, but the thing is, like, we just have to stick to the basics and do it very, very well. And, you know, you've been doing this for decades. You practice what you preach, which is also rare. And that is why I have a huge amount of respect for you. So I do have a couple of questions for you that I would like for you to answer in order to really drop some wisdom for the audience. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about your journey. How did you get started? How did you get introduced to weightlifting, strength and conditioning? And you guys, I mean, this guy is an absolute legend. You know, a lot of my audience are women between the ages of like 30 to 50, that sort of thing, who are either starting to work out or have been working out for about a year or two. So if you don't know who Mike is, definitely check him out afterwards. I mean, you're affiliated with USA Weightlifting, CrossFit Weightlifting. I mean, the Bergner warm-up, that's you, you know? It's funny, like every time I teach any of my female clients, you know, any Olympic lifting movements with the PVC pipe, like I think about you. I mean, you know, like, guys, he's an absolute legend. Give me a smiley face or a thumbs up if you already know who Mike is.
No. I'm not sure I do.
You're not sure you do? I love it. Okay, but let's go back a couple of years and let's talk about your journey. How did you get started with your own journey?
Boy, at a very, very young age, I really liked going down to the corner soda shop, so to speak, back in Marion, Illinois. And in that soda shop, there were these magazines that were like Muscle and Fitness or Strength and Fitness and Strength and Health and all these guys. And they were really big into the fitness and the bodybuilding. So I really liked that, appealed to me at the time, and didn't have any money, but I'd go in there and just look at the magazine, so to speak. And my dad was a big believer in hard work for fitness rather than lifting weights, and his feeling was that anybody lifting weights that were going to get muscle bound. So he wouldn't let me lift weights. Well, then fast forward, I would do push-ups and pull-ups or do anything that I could to make my muscles grow, so to speak. And but anyway, I went on to Notre Dame to play football, and my coach was Erin Sarit, and he was a Hall of Fame coach. And you know, he wanted me to gain weight. He wanted me to get up to 185 pounds. And from my 165 pounds. And so he took me down to the weight room at Notre Dame, which was run by a Catholic priest by the name of Father Lang. BHB Lang. And Father Lang, funded his own weight room. The university only gave him a place to store all of his equipment, and so he built his own weight room. And at that time, this was in 1964, Father Lang's weight room in Notre Dame's weight room was probably one of the very few weight rooms offered at any college in the United States. It just wasn't a high priority. But Father Lang was big in the snatch, the clean and jerk, the clean and press, the squat, the deadlift, all those heavy duty exercises Father Lang was really big into. And so that's basically how I got my start. He's the one that got me training, taught me the basics, the fundamentals, and then it just went on from there.
So Father Lang in 1964, basically.
I think that was before you were born, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was before I was even planned, or even I think my parents were still kids. I don't think they knew what weightlifting was. So, okay, I'm intrigued too, and I'm gonna ask you some questions because I don't think we've ever talked about that yet. But when you were you're basically introduced to weightlifting through football, correct?
That's correct.
And then when did you transition into competing in weightlifting?
Immediately.
Really?
Father Lang he had a weightlifting team, and there were about 5 or 6, 7, 8 of us that would go in the weight room, and these weren't football players. These were just regular students at Notre Dame. And we would travel around the Midwest and go to different weightlifting contests in the Midwest during the off season. Once football season was over with, then that's how I trained to get ready for the next season.
So full transparency, I haven't looked up of any of Notre Dame stats, but knowing what I know, I can only imagine that a football player that does Olympic weightlifting competitively off season has a huge advantage because you guys must have been way freaking stronger than the other teams. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that weightlifting had on your performance back then as an athlete?
Yeah, well, my speed, I was an athlete that was very powerful. I could run fast and I could jump high. But my body weight, it was hard for me to gain weight. And so I went from 165 pounds and running a 4.55 40, which is a pretty good time, but not a great time. Today's standards, it's not a great time. But I went from weighing 165 to weighing 185, and my 40-yard dash time went down to 4.45, which was huge. So all of a sudden I'm bigger, I'm stronger, and I'm faster, all because I lift weights. And and then in the summer times I'd go up to Michigan and run on the sand dunes and do hill sprints and things like that. And those are the tradition. No one else was doing that at the time. People would typically go out and run 3 or 4 miles for fitness, and they wouldn't do the fitness that was needed to carry over to a football game.
Oh man, this is so powerful. I will relate this to a question that I have with you later on, But so that's how you got introduced to weightlifting. Obviously, it completely boosted your performance, and I can only imagine aesthetic goals too, because you put on a lot of muscle mass, like healthy mass. But what was your next chapter after football?
Well, while I was at Notre Dame, I joined the Marine Corps. And so I was in a special program called the PLC program. But I ended up, it's kind of a long story, but I ended up having a couple of discharges from the Marine Corps because I blew out my knee. And so right after college, then I went, while I still had a non-status in the Marine Corps because of the knee, but I went on to the University of Kentucky and became a strength coach. The head football coach at Kentucky was my defensive coordinator at Notre Dame.
Okay.
And so I went down to Kentucky and became a strength coach and got my master's degree at the same time in exercise physiology. And then, I couldn't let the Marine Corps thing go, and strictly by accident, going over to the student union, the Marines were in there, and I told them my story about how I had 2 honorable discharges from the Marine Corps because of my knee, and they convinced me to go into Louisville and get another physical, and I passed it. so I was joined the Marine Corps again, and so I was in the Marine Corps, and then that's basically I lost sight of a lot of Olympic style weightlifting, but I was really into the fitness. So I was an officer, so I had I was in a force reconnaissance unit. So we had a lot of fitness and conditioning that we had to do with these guys. We were jump qualified, scuba qualified. We did all that kind of training. So we still lifted weights, but the Olympic style weightlifting at that point was not a high priority for me. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps in 1975, then I went right into coaching and teaching and coaching, and I became known for the Olympic lifts at the high school level, and this is back in 1975 or so.
Amazing. So, couple questions for you with regards for that. Would you say that being stronger, having practiced weightlifting, did that help you with the recovery process?
Oh, sure, absolutely. That was the big deal. When I blew out my knee, and this was in '67 or so, they told me I'd never play football again. But I continued to squat and deadlift, and back then they'd put you in a cast, and you'd be casted for 8 weeks, and your knee would scar down, and you had a bent knee. But I worked through that because of squats. And I went from being told I'd never play football again to I played again, and of course I blew my knee out again, but that was basically it. And I was told by the Marine Corps that okay, I was now a 4F, I think it was, and I wasn't qualified to be in the Marine Corps, and yet I continued to train,
Sure.
and I continued to do all the stuff that I do, and they convinced me to take the physical, and I passed the physical with flying colors, even though I had that 4F qualification.
I love it.
So all because of weightlifting.
You guys, and that is a very important point to keep in mind, that the fitter you are and the stronger you are, the better your recovery process is going to be with anything in life. Like, studies have shown literally an exponential difference between somebody who has more muscle mass, greater bone density due to lifting and being fitter versus somebody who's not lifting. Mike, later I'm going to ask you a couple of questions with regards for just a lot of myths that are out there, especially myths that women have. And I know, and you know, that we know the right thing, but we're going to drop some knowledge bombs and, just keep it raw and real. But another question that I have for you is, would you say that your passion for coaching was brought about sort of as a blessing from the adversities of the injuries, though you have a competitor's mindset because you were facing all these adversities and weren't basically able to compete as often? Is that what drew you to coaching?
I just think the camaraderie of being with a group. At Notre Dame, we had 8 to 10 guys that traveled throughout the United States, and they weren't football players. They were just regular students at Notre Dame, like I said. I became the coach out of necessity because no one else, Father Lang was our coach, but Father Lang I think he was 78 or 79, and he had diabetes and couldn't travel. So we would travel and we'd coach each other. So I became, there's a guy by the name of Kent Durso who I love dearly, and he was a senior. He was 1 year ahead of me, and he basically was the captain of the weightlifting team, but I was the coach of the weightlifting team. So, he and I would coach together everybody else, and we'd formulate their programs and get ready for the meets and that sort of thing. So, um, it was a natural transition. So when I became the strength coach at Kentucky, I probably was the very first strength coach other than Father Lang at the university level, because no one back then lifted weights. They just didn't do it that much, And then I came along, Father Lang came along, I came along, but the real emphasis started in '72 with a guy by the name of Boyd Epley at the University of Nebraska. He's the one that got credit for the renovation of college weightlifting, so to speak. And he formed the National Strength and Conditioning Association and so on and so forth. But Bob Hoffman was the godfather of weightlifting, so to speak, out in York, Pennsylvania. But, he dealt with everybody. He didn't really deal with the colleges.
Sure.
Not until Epley came along in '72 that, that weightlifting started becoming a very important part of the collegiate athletics.
Sure. So let's do a quick recap for some of us who are just joining in. Basically, 1964, you got introduced to weightlifting, University of Notre Dame, by Father Lang. 1972 is basically when you started your coaching journey, right? Because you had to, just take it upon yourself. You're like, somebody's gotta do it. It's gonna be me. And, obviously you've created something incredible out of it. I mean, anybody who now just follows any of the college sports, I mean, the level of athletics has just increased exponentially within the last couple of decades. And that is because of basically the weightlifting room. Right? Like that became a priority because, like you said before, lifting will make you bigger, stronger, and faster. So what came after that?
Well, that was a pretty long career or so. In 1970, when was it? 1975, I became the strength coach and football coach at a small high school in Southern California called Fallbrook High School. It's up North County. And then I was at Fallbrook for 4 years, and then I took a trip back to Southern Illinois and Southeast Missouri, and I got a head coaching job at a little town called Perryville, Missouri. And I stayed there 1 year because my wife, a California girl, did not like the Midwest. So we came back. We came back after 1 year. And I taught and coached at Carlsbad High School, and then in 81, I got over to Vista High School, and went into the Vista Unified School District and stayed at Vista for 4 or 5 years, then switched over to Rancho Buena Vista High School. That allowed me to come in and design my own weight room. I got to budget the weight room. I got to build the weight room. And so that happened in 1986, I believe it was.
That is.
And then we just been going strong since then.
I love it. And, I mean, for you, weightlifting is not just what you do. It's an absolute definition of it is who you are. Like, you have a gym at your home where you literally have friends and people come and train at your gym because, I always say this, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And, you're at the absolute definition of that. It's like, it's who you are and what you do is amazing. Can you tell us just a little bit of what happens in your home on a daily basis or on a regular basis?
Oh God, it's crazy. But I mean, when we built our home in 1985. I had a young son, Casey, in 1982, and then in '85 we found this piece of property and basically built a nice home on it, and it just happened to have a 2-car garage that a car has never been parked in it, and we we built the gym in the garage, basically. And I'd go to school teaching early in the morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock, and then I'd come home, and the kids would follow me home, and they'd want to work out at Mike's gym. So we ended up building a weightlifting team back in the '80s. With strictly high school kids, and then I came together with four other coaches: Pat Cullen Carroll, Rich Tucker, John Rodriguez, Steve Kenyon. We came together and formed a team called Team Southern California, and we were all school teachers. And this was back in the '80s, and we formed our team. We competed against each other, but when we went to perform nationally, we performed under one umbrella, and that was Team Southern California. And every one of those guys are great friends and great coaches, and we had a very, very strong team, And but I think the important thing to think about here is that when I took my job at Rancho Buena Vista High School, I was a strength coach. I was no longer a football coach, but I was a strength coach. I was hired for becoming that strength coach that was responsible for coaching all the teams, typically football team, but baseball, basketball, track and field, and all those teams as well. And then I taught that in my PE class. My students, their goals and objectives were set and based on the Olympic lifts. My final exam was the snatch, the clean and jerk, and the front squat. And they weren't based on how much weight they lifted. They were based on the technique that, that they had to display. And I'd written a book. I mean, today it'd be called an ebook, but it was about 30 or 40 pages, but it dealt with teaching high school physical education weight room. And my goals and objectives were written. The Bergner warm-up was down there. I mean, no one knew what the hell to call it until CrossFit, but we had this warm-up that we did every day, and so the kids were very structured and very disciplined, but their grade was based on the 10 points of performance that I had written in this book.
What are those?
And well, how do you set up? There's certain standards that when you address the bar and you go down and grab the bar, there's certain ways that you certain points of performance that you had to have in order to get 2 points. So there was 10 points total. There was 5 standards, but there's 2 points for every one of those standards. How did I lift the bar from the ground to above my knee? And how did I lift the bar from above my knee to that loading double knee bend position? How did I explode upward and finish? I mean, all those were subjectively graded by me by watching, and I would give them points, and so consequently, the big strong guys that would want to, bull their neck and bubble their snot, so to speak, and their technique was terrible. And the younger guys that would pay attention to old Coach B and do the technique right would always lift less weight in the beginning and get good grades, but then they kept to the standards that we had in those 10 points of performance, and they always lifted more weights than the big guys later on because technique rules. And that's what we held our hat on. So I didn't want to give the message that we're going to lift heavy weights until they were adequately prepared for that. They had to learn the technique first.
Sure. Or as we say, first you move well, you basically earn the bar.
Exactly.
Amazing. So far, you guys, as you can see, this guy, I mean, you are who you are, and that's why I love you so much. Like, you literally, not just because of what you did, but because of how you go about it. You're just so humble about it. He basically revolutionized strength and conditioning. And it's incredible how far it has come. And, you've been it since day one. And it's incredible what passion and just having a strong sense of values and, being in tune with those can really create. So before we get into the next part, number one, thank you for your service. And also, thank you just for everything that you've done. I tell you this all the time, like, you're just rare. And it's an honor to have you here today. Now there is a couple of. Can I start picking at your brain now?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's not much there, but go ahead. I'll do the best I can.
Okay. So let's begin with more current events. Do you ever read the New York Times?
No.
Okay. I don't usually either. But yesterday a client of mine sent me an article, which, I mean, the title of it is interesting, and I feel like if people don't really understand the why, they might really be misled. But basically, the New York Times published an article yesterday that said, in a nutshell, that aerobic training increases metabolic capacity better than strength. So
I disagree.
Right. And I feel like there is a lot of things that are left out, but just from that title, it's very misleading. Can you give your 2 cents on it?
Yeah, my 2 cents was if it's I guess the experiences that I've had in my lifetime initially were obviously they were aerobic based.
Sure.
We went out and ran 3 miles
Sure.
in the Marine Corps for fitness and conditioning and stuff like that. But I always go back to my time at Notre Dame that the best conditioning that I ever had was when I would A, lift weights, and B, when I go to the sand dunes and sprint the uphill dunes.
Yep.
Now there's no aerobicness to that whatsoever.
Right.
Now I would do aerobic training, but it would be fartlek style. It might be okay, I'm going to go 3 miles today, and every 200 meters, I'm going to sprint 100 meters. So I'm going to sprint 100 meters. I'm going to walk 100 meters. I'm going to jog 100 meters, and then I'm going to sprint 100 meters. That type of thing, and that would be, I guess, that would be the style of aerobic training that I did back in the '60s. Whereas a lot of guys at Notre Dame that did not buy into the weightlifting, they would go out and during the off season they would run 3 miles.
Oh my God.
And they would do some push-ups and shit like that. And I didn't. I did my conditioning that was very intuitive, based on what the game of football is all about. I mean, you get lazy in football because a play in football might last, if you're lucky, 3 or 4 seconds, 5 seconds, and then you got 35 or 40 seconds rest before you go again. So your conditioning back then, for me anyway, had to be based on explosiveness. The explosiveness of running a play, the explosiveness of making a tackle, the explosiveness of sprinting downfield to break up a pass in football. So that's what I tried to do in my conditioning. And so we basically used that format when I became a football coach. We used that in our conditioning. Very rarely that I would take the athletes out on a long distance run, but I would typically do it in a column of threes, singing chants that would bring the team not aerobically conditioned, but bring them together mentally and physically. To be part of a network of, hey, we're together, we're a team, and we sang chants just like we did in the Marine Corps. I'd run them in a column of threes, and I'd be off to the side, and I'd run with them. Type of situation. So I've never been really involved in the aerobic part of strength and conditioning, unless of course you're a cross country runner and or 2 mile runner on the track. But even then, as a track coach, I did most of my conditioning was based on that anaerobic threshold.
Sure. I asked you that for 2 reasons. Now, number one, you and I are on the same page, and I knew that, and it was funny because when I saw that, I had to break down to my clients why is it that we do what we do. I think basically what the New York Times was trying to portray is that overall conditioning will boost your metabolic capacity way more than just doing like straight up bodybuilding. 3 sets of 10 and like resting for 2 minutes. That is not going to make you a fitter person. It's just going to, increase the growth in your muscle. So for any of you guys who do follow, like, all of these, like, studies have shown, blah, 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 like, number one, know that you have to take everything with a grain of salt, because the things that are being portrayed, like, if you don't actually know the whys behind it, may mislead you. Doing just straight up aerobic training, let's say like spin class or 3 mile run on the treadmill, is not going to make you fitter, just like we touched on before. By doing weightlifting and strength and conditioning, okay, where we, involve different training modalities and train different energy systems, like you said with the sprint, right? Like we tap into the anaerobic threshold, rather than just working on that same aerobic energy system. You're getting so much further. So that is just something that I wanted to bring across, because that's really important. Also, the reason why I say that is especially because I feel like unless females are either already in the weightlifting and crossfitting and the CrossFit community, they're completely misled. And we know that, if you were to think about the entire universe, like, yes, though the community is growing, which is amazing, like, it's still really small. Women are scared to lift weights. They think it's going to make them bulky. And the reason why I say that is because, throughout my career so far, and I feel blessed to have had that impact on women. But, like, before somebody starts training with me, the woman, or let's say my client, would point on me and, like, will bring me to the side and say, I want to train with you, but just so you know, I don't want to lift weights because I don't want to look bulky. So then I set her down and, I tell her, do you know what is it that I do for training? No, what do you do? I lift weights. Okay, so can we do it in a way where we don't get bulky? So just so you guys know, that is a huge misconception. Weightlifting is not going to make you bulky. Weightlifting is going to make you leaner. It's going to make you faster. It's going to make you stronger. It's only when you have now lifted a shit ton of weight for a really long amount of time and you're lifting really heavy that you're going to basically start bulking up. And trust me, unless you want that, you're not going to get that. And that is not easy, because we need to manipulate a lot of other nutrition techniques and supplementation along with that too. Mike, do you agree?
I agree absolutely. It's and it's just like I was going to say. In order, you said beautifully, is that if you're going to get bulky with it, then you have to eat a shit ton of calories as well. I'd like to tell the story, if you don't mind, of my son Casey, who was a 2008 Olympian. He was an alternate on the Olympic team, which is a whole different story. But anyway, Casey was a tall, skinny athlete, and he couldn't gain weight. And so we made the commitment he needed to go up a weight class in weightlifting. And so in order to do that, I would get him up at 2 o'clock in the morning after we prepared 1,000-calorie milkshake the night before. And I'd go get the 1,000-calorie milkshake out of the refrigerator, and at 2 in the morning, he had to drink that milkshake. And then in the morning time, we had a guy that would give us emu steaks and emu eggs. Well, the emu egg is about the big as an oyster egg, right? I mean, an ostrich egg, it's just unbelievable. They're big. So Casey'd have to eat steak and eggs in the morning. And then every hour on the hour, once he got to school, he had to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwiches after his class. So he was taking in an absorbent amount of calories in order to get his body weight up to where it needed to be. So if you're on a good, solid, foundational diet, you're just going to make the muscle stronger. And those muscle fibers are going to become like steel cables, and you're going to be stronger. You're going to be healthier. It just overall is aesthetically, it's a much better look as well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So.
Can I share with you, a quick story?
Sure.
So, when I've been on my own fitness journey for I would say almost 20 years now. But to be honest, it wasn't until about 7 years ago that I actually started doing it right. Until then, I was just the typical, what I would call cardio girl. Thinking that by running more on the treadmill, I will lose weight, I will feel better, but absolutely not, until I met 3 strength and conditioning coaches who I will forever be grateful for, because they changed the trajectory of my life. And they introduced me to what you'd basically call CrossFit, but more in a strength and conditioning way, not just Metcons. And at the time when I met them, I had signed up for 2 races, because again, I was a cardio person. That's what cardio people do if they want to get competitive, or motivated.
Right.
So within 3 months of doing strength and conditioning, my mile time has improved from 7:24 per mile to 6:03, and I was able to maintain that. Not because I was running more, not because of the specificity, but because I started, incorporating, strength and conditioning. I started adding weightlifting. I got stronger. I manipulated different energy systems, and that was my first testimonial, holy shit, this is insane. Aside from the fact that suddenly, I started really looking shredded. I was like, where is this coming from? And I got faster, and I was like, this is amazing. And I kept on getting hooked and hooked. So, everything that you're saying, I 100% agree, not just because that is what had transformed my body and my life, but also that is the exact same thing that I do with my clients. But I must admit, I probably don't do it near half as well as you do, and especially weightlifting. That is not my forte. But you know what? I do have the passion. I got another question for you.
Are you having? Do you hear a double talking here?
No, do you?
Yeah, I hear it.
Really?
It's like you're I'm.
Uh-oh. Did it just start happening?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Still now?
Yeah, I'm talking, but then it's yeah. See, I hear you asking me, did it just start happening? And even though you're not talking, it's not 1-to-1.
How's your service, Mike?
Good. I mean, I tell you, I'm looking. Hold on. I don't know. Well, we can go ahead and deal with it. If you're not hearing it, if the other listeners aren't hearing it, then we can deal with it.
I don't think they are, but I think that's probably a sign that we should start wrapping things up soon. Okay, I have one very important question for you. So like I said at the beginning, most of the listeners here are females between the ages of 30 and 50. Now, both you and I know the impact that weightlifting has on bone density and how crucial it is as we age. Can you just give me your 2 cents with regards for weightlifting and longevity, especially within that arena?
Well, I mean, we believe in it. I mean, obviously, we feel that the athletes that come to Mike's gym, and my wife runs a class called the Mambas, Mothers Against Making Bingo Arms, right? And
Okay.
so she, that age group is between 60 and 70, and so that's why they do it. They lift weights to help their bone density in case of falling and so on and so forth. And that's for the older population, right? But in the geezers, it's the same way. We do it to make sure that we keep our bones strong, our muscles strong, so that we can actually get down on the ground and get back up again. But it doesn't matter what population you're in. It could be the geezer, it could be the very young kids that are playing popcorn or football or whatever, or that generation you're talking about, the 30, 40, 50 generation. We all lift weights to help the bone density, so that can help us in case of injuries. We can recover faster and maybe not have as bad of an injury as that we might have if we weren't lifting weights. So.
For sure. Quick fun fact for everybody. Mike, I don't know if you know this, but did you know that people over the age of 60 die more often than from falling down and not being able to get back up than from cancer? You guys,
right.
I mean, what kind of alarm is that for anybody? People are trying to do XYZ, get whatever, blah, 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 magic pill. This is the magic pill, and it's called consistency, and it's called discipline, and it's called hard work. And that is why it was so important for me to bring, Mike on the camera, because, I mean, look at this guy. I mean, how healthy and vibrant and energetic he is. I'm sure you don't have a line of cocktails in your fridge of things that you're just taking because you've heard all sorts of, BS, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all the mistakes I made in the past are heavily duty mistakes, right? So you learn from making mistakes. You learn how to live the right way for you, not the cocktails that you're referring to that somebody else has taken. I've learned that for me, that doesn't work.
Right. Right.
It's not, taking all the ibuprofen in the world isn't it's only going to mask maybe the knee or the tightness that I have, but it's better to not do that, but just go swimming, go stretching, go, lift your weights, do the things that's going to give you a good positive mental outlook to, help not only yourself, but help other people that come to you.
Oh my gosh. I always say this. It is an obligation for you as a person, as a high performer, to take care of yourself, because if you don't do that, then you can't take care of others as well. Because something
Exactly.
that a lot, a big, and I'm going to call it excuse, I don't care what anybody says, that a lot of people have is, I don't have enough time to do that. It's not a matter of having time, it's a matter of finding the time and creating priorities. Do you have a priority of wanting to stay on this earth longer, of living a happy life, or no? If you want the contrary, then, living a sedentary life, I mean, will get you there. But living an active life, practicing a lot of weightlifting and just lifting, strength, and conditioning will do the contrary. Before I let you go, one last question for you. If you had, let's say, one message that you could share with anybody that you would hope would make a difference, what would that message be?
Oh, get up in the morning and live your best life. Whatever it is that gives you the satisfaction of going through a positive day, a rewarding day, and just do it. And for me, it's the fitness and health industry. I like lifting weights. I like the camaraderie of being with my geezer buddies on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and socializing while we're lifting weights. And on the other days, go down to the beach and walk and stop and talk with everybody and take pictures of the beautiful area that we live in. And just make yourself live your best life. For me, that's the most important thing.
I love it, and I absolutely agree. And you know what? Living our best life does require us to be fit, which means that we need to lift more weights. Mike, it's been an honor. Did you have fun?
Thank you. I have a great day.
Good.
I did. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh my gosh, no, it's my absolute honor. Thank you for giving us your time and just dropping a lot of wisdom and truth. I think a lot of people need to hear that, especially women and young women. There's a lot of noise out there, and I think a lot of people are being misled. So thank you so much. Mike, have a beautiful weekend. Thank you for your time. And you guys, I will see you on Monday morning, 6 a.m. Have a beautiful weekend, everybody. Thank you so much. That was